This video is just a quick reading of the life and times of Frederick Douglass. Chapter 6 is entitled A Child's Reasoning. And at the start of this chapter, Frederick Douglass raises the questions, what is slavery? And why am I a slave? Frederick Douglass then relates what it is that he's been told about slavery. He has been told that God made black people slaves and white people slave masters. However, Frederick Douglass observes that 1, not all black people are slaves. 2, a black person can become free, they can be emancipated, or they can escape to freedom. And 3, not all white people are slave masters. After relating these observations, Frederick Douglass immediately resumes his narrative describing the everyday life of a slave. It is important to observe that beyond this point, he does not explore or develop these questions. And one wonders why he has given the chapter the title, A Child's Reasoning. Is observing the inconsistencies and contradictions of an explanation childish? Is it something that only a child could do or would do? Or is the title, A Child's Reasoning, designed to convince the reader to excuse or overlook the extreme poverty with which these two questions are treated? Chapter 6 is neither a historical or philosophical treatment of the questions. Frederick Douglass does not arrive at a positive definition of slavery. He concludes by determining what slavery is not. Slavery is not due to race. And yet, right after determining that slavery is not due to race, Frederick Douglass will construct a white mythology and conclude that slavery can only be due to race. It is the only motivation for enslaving his people. Chapter 11 is given the title, Growing in Knowledge. And here, Frederick Douglass will victoriously trumpet his acquisition of a complete understanding of slavery. He begins by relating the tenor of frequent conversations which he has with young white boys in the neighborhood. He frequently asks them, "Have I not as good a right to be free as you have?" And these young free white boys will confirm Frederick Douglass's belief. On the very next page, Frederick Douglass writes, "Over and over again, they have told me that they believed I had as good a right to be free as they had." Frederick Douglass will also relate reading and studying a book called The Columbian Orator, which consists of various speeches and dialogues on things like truth, the rights of man, oppression, and slavery. After relating all this, Frederick Douglass will declare, "I had now penetrated to the secret of all slavery and of all oppression, and had ascertained their true foundation to be in the pride, the power, and the avarice of man. Slaveholders, thought I, are only a band of successful robbers who, leaving their own homes, went into Africa for the purpose of stealing and reducing my people to slavery." At this point, it might help to remember something that impressed Derrida a great deal, the analogy of kettle logic, which was extracted from Freud. Freud introduces kettle logic with a story of someone who borrowed a kettle, and when he returned the kettle, the person he returned it to complained that it had been damaged and had holes in it. The person that borrowed the kettle responded by saying, "I never borrowed a kettle from you. The kettle I borrowed already had holes in it. The kettle I'm returning to you is brand new." Kettle logic is piling up contradictory statements. We have that here. There are no differences between black people and white people. There's only one difference between black people and white people, skin color. All the differences between blacks and whites are due to the animosity and hostility of white people toward blacks. Frederick Douglass establishes sameness. The young slave asking free young boys, "Haven't I got the same rights as you?" White mythology, the effacement of cultural history and development, the replacement of cultural history and development. After establishing sameness, complete sameness. One difference is admitted, the obvious difference, the undeniable difference, and that difference becomes the origin of difference. The reason, the only possible explanation for all the other differences. What is slavery? Why were our ancestors slaves? These are not childish questions. Shouldn't a black philosophy, a black cultural history begin with these two questions? Africa was an eager and willing participant in the slave trade. Africa didn't just sell a few slaves for a few years. They sold millions and millions of human beings for hundreds of years. African culture became organized around slavery. They groomed people for slavery, and they eagerly anticipated the arrival of slave traders. Africa practiced the absolute devaluation of human life. They were trading human beings in exchange for glass beads, rusted muskets, fake gold and jewelry, and other garbage. Africa taught the Europeans and the Americans to devalue the lives of blacks. Africa taught the world that the lives of blacks have no value. The slave trader docked on the coast of Africa, and in one side of the balance, the slave trader placed rusted muskets, fake gold and jewelry, glass beads. And in the other side of the balance, Africa crammed as many human beings as they could. And Africa said, that's a fair trade. Africa taught the Europeans, the Americans, and worst of all, the Africans themselves, to devalue people with dark skin. One of the points that Frederick Douglass is attempting to make throughout his narrative is that the practice of slavery itself degrades, debases, and corrupts the nature of those who practice it. Africa practiced slavery. What is slavery? Slavery is not an economic condition like inflation or recession. Slavery exists, it's practiced outside of industrialization, outside of systems of currency, taxes, and wages, outside of the system of government and big royal projects. Slavery is a human behavior. Slavery is whenever the individual must trade for self-worth or value as a human being. To the questions, what is slavery and why were our ancestors slaves, we must add the question, why can't we, the descendants of American slaves, base our worldview on the truth?